explorers. Today we are exploring Comuna 13, or Comuna 13, in Medellin, a place that has literally been through hell but come out colorful, loud, and full of hope. Stick around. I've got stories, street art, insider tips, and an awesome ride ahead. As you can see here, we are on the way. But let's give you some context. In the 80s and 90s, Comuna 13 was a hotspot for drug cartels, guerrillas, paramilitaries, and full-blown violence. This is something you saw daily, hourly. You can name it, whatever they had, it is a steep, isolated hillside made for perfect shady covers, battles, and hijackings. It wasn't just about it being risky or dangerous. It was literally life or death. Now, in October 2002 came an operation called Orion. This is when over 1,500 troops, tanks, and helicopters, basically a blunt military strike, came in and quote-unquote liberated the area. However, this has left a ton of stories of disappearances, trauma, and potential unmarked mass graves, with hundreds of people being affected. It was an incredibly scary time, and our tour guide that you see here in the beautiful white hat was actually someone that grew up in this area and shared their experience. Now, after some time, things cooled down a bit, and Medellin city leaders were said that they didn't want any more walls, specifically anything that could hinder their interference within the community if it continued to go down this path. Because of that, they believed in order to provide the community with more safety, it meant offering more accessibility. In 2006, they began to build cable cars that linked the metro to these outdoor escalators that you will see later on. They have like this orange top. So that way it takes no more than 350 steps up our hill. For locals, it was considered freedom and connection to other parts of the neighborhood. What I didn't realize was how big Comuna 13 was going to be. I figured it would be a street or two, maybe a very, very small district, but it was actually quite large. Now, as Comuna 13 began to receive more accessibility, as you can see here, there's a variety of ways to get there. It started to explode with vibrant murals, each one telling a tale about what happened through all these years of violence, as well as in this transition into a more peaceful space. Now, our guide talked about how some white flags represent peace, birds for hope, but a lot of the murals talked about loss and pain, as well as resilience of the community. There is also a corridor that talked about how mothers were correct. And during this period, there were a lot of missing family members. So, if anything, it's a way of advocating for trusting motherly instinct. Now, local artists like Chota Trece and Casa Colacho lead hip-hop, graffiti, and dance groups as a way to promote creativity, to give voice to their stories, as well as making sure that they show people how proud they are of their community's growth. Most tours are led by residents, just as mine was. He grew up here and talked about how his family kind of kept him sheltered from a lot of the violence that was happening. But he also told us some pretty strong stories of, let's say, walking to school in between military tanks, so that way it would be a safe passage just to get his education. Artists, ex-residents, hip-hop teachers, all of them share personal stories, and you can see how the ambience of the neighborhood is actually because of these people that bring their continued life experience and all of their talent and feed it into this region. In continuation of their rebranding, they didn't just put in art. They also built library parks, computer access, and community spaces. You'll see one later where you have places in order to play basketball or to play football with students. There's a group called Casa Colacho that actually started teaching hip-hop programs for kids, and they call it Louder Than Bullets, which teaches expression over aggression. The escalators and cable cars integrated Comuna 13 socially and physically. Now, our guide was talking about how they did have to ask some homeowners to leave that space and to go somewhere new. But the entirety of the community were able to be spaced out and placed in places that allow them to express their art forms and bring in money into the community in a more structured and safer way. So as you saw, that was one of the dance performances that they offered in the streets. Incredibly talented individuals, and bring some cash in order to provide the performers with some extra money for their wonderful work. Now, as you walk, you're definitely going to experience a lot of color, a ton of hip-hop, reggaeton, and loud music, people calling you over to try their food, to try their hair extensions, and even some people calling for you to try some weed brownies. One of the favorite things I did get to try is actually this form of ice cream that they had. I can't remember the name. However, they basically took different pieces of fruit, lemon juice, some salt, and then they froze that over in a plastic cup. It was exactly what I needed for the humidity and heat here, but also it was just so fresh and delicious. Our guide kept saying how sweet it was gonna be, and he's sorry if we do not like sweet, but it honestly was a good mixture of sweet and salty. It wasn't overbearing on our senses. Some of the things you might see are people actually going in and out of their homes, drinking some coffee, mothering their children, and basically being able to continue living their everyday life, even though you have this hustle and bustle of all of these tourists that are coming in. I think it is an interesting balance of trying to promote and encourage people to come to the community and to share their history with the world, as well as respecting the privacy and nature of the lives of the people that still live in this community.
Ciao, gracias.
I definitely recommend going with a guide because there are so many different alleyways, and because of how packed it can get, it's just easier to make sure that you do not get lost, and of course, just being safe. With that many people in such a small and narrow space, be mindful of your belongings and ensure that you are trying to come during a time period that's not so crazy, so maybe earlier in the morning. Definitely pack cash. Again, one of the tips I learned very early. For small snacks or for art along the way, bring lots of water, as it is at a higher incline. You do have to move up and down the stairs, and for me, as someone that had just started to relearn how to walk, it was kind of hard at times, but nothing too crazy. I just would recommend to, again, bring that water, some electrolytes if you need, and definitely some comfy shoes. If you are doing some graffiti workshops, I didn't get to do that, but I wish I had. Roll up your sleeves and bring some clothes that you don't mind getting dirty. The other thing that they offered to us as group tourist was to try a kind of puff pastry or bread that is loaded with cheese, but I heard it was really delicious. Again, it's not something I can try. I'm lactose intolerant. However, my roommate that you see here, Miss Lavia Stefania, said it was absolutely to die for. Comuna 13's story isn't about the scars, it's about how people picked up the pieces and turned them into murals, music, and community lifts. It's messy, vibrant, hopeful, but if you want a dose of real transformation and just an overall feel of the Colombian people, I think to see their positivity and their outgoingness and this huge connection to music and food is so worth the journey. As you can see here, it got dark after we came back into Medellin Center, and we were just kind of exploring around our hostel. We ended up staying at the Masayo hostel, and let me tell you, I loved it. We had a beautiful rooftop bar, a place where you can order food. I think they had 2 restaurants, and the space was very clean and modern. The streets that you see here are around Calle 9, which has a lot of bars and restaurants. It's literally right around the corner, and there is so much to do. Every little shop, every little restaurant has its own vibe and presence, and it really was interesting just walking around and seeing what Medellin has to offer. Come back for my next video as I explore Salento, a traditional Colombian town with beautiful palm trees, coffee farms, and so much more.